The Nikon D1 was introduced for sale on June 15, 1999, for $5,500. It was the first digital SLR manufactured and released entirely by Nikon, with Nikon components and Nikon technology. If you think the price tag of $5,500 in 1999 is high, consider that the next cheapest DSLR on the market was the Kodak DC620, which cost $11,000. The Nikon D1 sports a 2.74 megapixel CCD image sensor, which was the very first DX sensor. The camera could shoot as fast as 4.5 frames per second, which in 1999 was lightning quick, and having a maximum shutter speed of 1/16,000th. The camera can shoot in RAW format, but the Nikon D1 was actually the very first digital camera to have the ability to shoot in JPEG format. All other digital cameras at this time shot in TIFF only. However, the camera did have its issues. The Nikon D1's major malfunction was its battery. They were not only enormous, they didn't last very long, and quickly lost their capacity to take a full charge. More crippling though, once the batteries got low, the camera would continue to shoot, but its image processing would shut down, meaning it would only record blank frames. The next model of the D1 would fix this, but it was a big-time problem, and you wouldn't know it was happening unless you previewed the images. Also, although the camera is solid as a rock and built for weather protection, the camera was easily susceptible to dust on the sensor, leading to black spots on images. This is not uncommon for CCD image sensors, and the reason most camera makers adopted CMOS sensors. And the dynamic range wasn't the greatest. If you overexposed even a little bit, your highlights were unrecoverable. The Nikon D1 was the first professional DSLR that was adopted by major newspapers. The combination of speed, functionality, durability, and low price point did what the competition could not. It would be several years before Nikon had serious competition. The Nikon Z9 was introduced for sale on October 28, 2021, for $5,500. Unlike the original D1, the image sensor of the Z9 is manufactured by Sony. But all other components and technology are by Nikon. It's interesting that both the D1 and the Z9 were introduced for a price of $5,500, 22 years apart. The Nikon Z9 sports a 45 megapixel stacked CMOS image sensor. The camera can shoot as fast as 120 frames per second, but in JPEG format only, and the resolution of these images would be 11 megapixels. If you want RAW files, you are limited to 30 frames per second. Now let's dig in and see what 24 years of innovation have brought to Nikon professional cameras. As mentioned previously, the original D1 had a crop sensor with a resolution of just under 3 megapixels, while the Z9 sports a 45 megapixel sensor. Very important here is that the Z9 has no mechanical shutter. It is mirrorless and uses an electronic shutter exclusively. You can see in the orange boxes that the imaging scores of these two cameras is vast, and should be expected. That doesn't mean that the D1 takes lousy pictures, it's just that the Z9 is that much better. A quick summary of some of the key differences in a 24-year timespan include: an ISO range that started with 200 to 1600 is now 64 to 25,600. Instead of the F mount, the newest camera has an all-new Z mount. The LCD on the original camera was a fixed 2-inch screen with very low resolution. And the newest camera has a 3.2-inch tilting screen with very high resolution. Instead of the optical viewfinder from the original camera, the Z9 sports a very high-resolution electronic viewfinder that provides the ability to see what the image will look like before you even take the picture. Where the original camera had zero video features, the Z9 can record video in resolutions as high as 8K, and in slow motion up to 120 frames per second. Let's take a deeper dive into the specific enhancements over the past 2 decades. The image sensor is now stacked CMOS instead of CCD, which means far better images. The electronic viewfinder has no blackout, meaning you won't see gaps in the viewfinder when snapping bursts of images. You can now connect the camera to wireless devices, like a phone or computer. The Z9 has built-in body image stabilization, which means you can shoot at much lower shutter speeds and still get very still image results. The LCD on the Z9 allows you to touch, like a cell phone, and change settings or focus areas. The Z9 has face and eye detection, where the D1 had a more primitive set of focus points centered in the middle of the image sensor. This allows the camera to lock onto a subject's face, or even their eyes, and stay locked on until the subject is out of the frame. As mentioned previously, the D1 has 0 video recording features. But the Z9 is cram-packed with features, including a microphone and headphone jack, the ability to do time-lapse, up to 8K resolution videos. And the video can be exported to an external recorder using a full-size HDMI port for highest possible bitrates. Other features that the D1 couldn't even dream about include focus bracketing and stacking, which gives the opportunity to do macro photography with the most crisp images. The Z9 buttons can be lit up in dark situations, making finding them easy in low light. Instead of a single compact flash slot that could hold only 2 GB of data, the Z9 has 2 memory card slots that use CF Express Type B that can have capacities into the terabytes. But 24 years of innovation haven't really changed the size of the cameras all that much. The Z9 is slightly shorter and slightly slimmer than the original D1. But the Z9 actually weighs more than the D1. However, the biggest leap is the battery life on the Z9 is far superior to the battery life on the D1. And here you can see that the image sensor on the original D1, from 1999, is far smaller than the more advanced full-frame sensor of the Z9. Many will argue that a CCD image sensor often provided better colors than the more modern CMOS sensors. But the pitfalls of a CCD sensor were just too great, and now you won't find that technology in any modern digital camera. Enjoy some of the images that were captured with both of these cameras. Courtesy of Kevin Campbell, from Lordstown, Ohio.